Hi, this is Paul Seils. I have with me today Arthur Firstenberg, is an American author, journalist, scientist, and activist on the subject of electromagnetic radiation and health. He's the founder of the independent campaign group, the Cellular Phone Task Force, and in his 1997 book, Microwaving Our Planet, the environmental impact of the wireless revolution was published by the group. He is the author of The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life. Thank you for joining us, Arthur.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. So I've been involved in this 5G movement for probably about the last 6 months now, and relevant concerns and people in community. I'm based in Australia, but we've got a group called Stop 5G Global, and I've got to acknowledge you and thank you for your presentation that you created. 5G, Birds, Bees and Humanity is probably one of the most easy to listen to and easy to watch presentations on the concerns about electromagnetic radiation and 5G. So thank you for creating that.
Yes, I had help in creating the video, but I gave the presentation.
Yeah. So can you give us a little bit of background about, we were just chatting earlier before we got started, and you said that you've got a background in this industry for nearly 39 years. You're based in the States, and you've been doing this actively as far as your work and your activism and your journalist concerned for nearly 25 years now. Can you give us a little bit of background about how you first got alerted to this and how this started for you?
I was in medical school in 1980. In the summer after my second year of medical school, I had some dental problems, and I had a large series of dental X-rays that injured me, and I became what some people call electrically sensitive or electromagnetically hypersensitive. It's a bad term, but it's very widely used. I became aware of electricity in my body, such that when I was near any electrical appliance that was on, or when I was exposed to X-rays or other electrical equipment in the hospital, it felt like an electric shock. And so I gradually became aware, because I could feel it, which I think if most people paid attention, they could feel it too.
Yeah.
But because of my injury, I was made hyper aware of what electricity was doing to me, and I started paying attention to things that I had never paid attention to before. And then I started going to the library and doing research, and I wrote a research paper for my surgery rotation. It was called The Effects of Radiant Energy on Living Organisms. And I started learning, and I started getting in contact with scientists in my country who were researching this issue, one of them being Robert Becker, who wrote a book in 1985 called The Body Electric. Another was W. Ross 80. Another was Neil Cherry, who was from Australia. He was an atmospheric physicist who studied this issue. And I became educated. That's how I got my start, is the effects on my own body were so severe that I eventually had to leave medical school at the end of my third year. Because I couldn't tolerate the electrical environment of the hospital anymore.
Yeah. Wow. So, and how is your health now? How's your well-being? Like, what's the status of, like, and how you go, how are you functioning with that? How are you functioning with that?
Well, my health is good, but functioning in the world is difficult because the world is heavily irradiated by cell phones and by the infrastructure that makes them work, namely cell phone antennas everywhere. And if a cell phone, if a mobile phone works where you live, you are being heavily irradiated.
Yeah.
And we all live in an electromagnetic soup nowadays. Basically, since the mid-1990s is when this infrastructure started to be very widely built all over the world.
And
so this means that I live in a house. It's an adobe house. It's with earthen walls, and that keeps out a lot of the radiation. And it means that I don't go out in public because every single person is carrying a cell phone and is usually on.
Yeah. And for the people that are the uninitiated, perhaps, who are listening, what are those symptoms? What are those? What's the impact? What's the effect on you and people that suffer from EHS?
Well, I don't use the term EHS anymore.
Okay, got it.
EHS is something of a political term, but it's also, in other words, all of society is ignorant and in denial that electricity is an environmental factor at all. And that we are electromagnetic beings. This is what Robert Becker gave us in his book, in his work, and in his book, The Body Electric. That when you start putting human beings in artificial electromagnetic fields, it interferes. First of all, it drowns out the natural electromagnetic environment on which we all depend for our health and our lives. And it interferes with the electrical signaling inside your body. The cell-to-cell communication, the electrical signaling that orchestrates health and growth and everything that goes on in your body is electromagnetic in nature. And in essence, we are very complex electronic machines, very complex. And like any piece of electronic equipment, it's subject to radio frequency interference. And nowadays, any time you build a piece of electronic equipment, you have to harden it against electromagnetic interference because it's being bombarded with so much stuff from our artificial environment. Well, our bodies are very complex pieces of electronic equipment as well. We are being bombarded, and we are not hardened against it because we did not evolve with it. Where was I? What was the question you asked?
We're just talking about the symptoms. What the symptoms for people?
The symptoms, yes. So what happens is it interferes with the. First of all, it induces electric currents. When you get hit with a cell phone signal or with a signal from an antenna nearby, it induces electric currents to flow in your body, and it interferes with nerve conduction. It interferes with the electrical conduction of your heart. So it causes heart irregularities. It causes neurological damage. The outcome is can be eventually anywhere from multiple sclerosis to Alzheimer's disease to autism, all these neurological disorders that are rampant in our society, and heart disease.
And also leukemia linked to cell phone usage as well, Arthur?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
with the electron transport system in the mitochondria of all of our cells. You interfere with electron transport, you're interfering with metabolism. So you cannot digest sugars, fats, and proteins efficiently. You can't digest sugars efficiently. It causes diabetes. You can't digest fats efficiently. It causes fats to be deposited in your arteries, and that causes, among other things, heart disease. And effectively, it slows down metabolism, starves us of oxygen, and cancer grows in the absence of oxygen, so it causes cancer. And I've shown in my book, I have 3 chapters. One on chapter 11 is on heart disease, 12 is on diabetes, 13 is on cancer. I've shown how the majority of those 3 diseases nowadays is caused by electrosmog, electromagnetic pollution, the majority of which is caused by the cell phone infrastructure nowadays. And so you're talking about symptoms. Yes, the classic symptoms of what is called electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which is just, the thing is, that's the name that patients have given to themselves because everybody, their doctors and their family and all their friends, they are telling them that this stuff is harmless, that everybody's in denial. So the people that have woken up to the fact that what they're feeling is real, they call themselves electromagnetically hypersensitive, but it's not a real term because everybody's feeling this stuff. And what everybody's feeling from their cell phones, particularly headaches, dizziness, joint pains, heart palpitations, all the stuff that's debilitating us in society, that we take medications for. It makes us depressed, it makes us anxious, so people are on anti-anxiety medications for it, people are on antidepressants, people have to take sleeping medications to sleep, and we people who don't do that, we call ourselves electrically sensitive. It's like we can't sleep, we get headaches, so I don't use a cell phone, so I don't get headaches. People are getting joint replacements in enormous numbers, like never before. Why? Because they keep their cell phones in their pocket. You get a hip replacement because it hurts.
Yeah.
You keep your cell phone on you all the time, or maybe in your shirt pocket, and you get heart irregularities. You go to the doctor. You get a pacemaker to regulate your heart. It's like it could be anywhere from a headache to a stroke to a heart attack. This to cancer. This is what all this radiation is causing. It's not just in a few percent of the people who've woken up.
So, further to that as well, I mean, I read some of the articles, and again, I don't know how accurate they are around some of your work, Arthur, but you were saying, and I was quoted to be saying that because the argument with the mainstream, and particularly the telecommunications that are pushing the agenda, that have massive budgets to promote the rollout of their infrastructure and their industry, are saying that it's harmless. But you were saying, you were quoted as saying as well that the 4G technology has already been responsible for deaths of numerous amount of people.
The 2G was already responsible for deaths. I estimated 10,000 deaths in the United States just from the rollout of 2G in 1996 and 1997.
So,
and the reason I estimated that is I looked at the weekly mortality statistics in the United States published by the Centers for Disease Control, and there was a 10 to 25% rise in mortality that started on the day that 2G cell phone service was initiated in all the different cities, and it was on a different date in every city. But suddenly, the weekly mortality went up 10 to 25%, and that lasted for 2 to 3 months. After those antennas were turned on, and there were a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
And I almost died in 1996. I escaped with my life from New York City, and I'm a refugee.
Yeah.
And if you talk about EHS, I talk about refugees.
Yeah.
Because these are the people who, if you ask them, and I've asked, you stand in front of a room full, any room of 100 people, and I haven't done this in a while, but when I was giving lectures back in the late 1990s, I would stand in front of a room of 100 people and say, how many of you are sensitive, because I was using that word back then, to electricity and electromagnetic fields? And 3-4 people would raise their hands. Now, that's 3-4% of the population. We have surveys done by universities and by governments in many nations that have asked the same question over the years. And the number has consistently gone up. So mostly it's 3, 4, 5%. We have a study from Taiwan. It was as much as 13%. If you say conservatively 3% of the world's population, that's 200 and some odd million people. And what percent of those are refugees? I would estimate 5%.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and then probably half the world is still not very heavily exposed, not to the extent that we are in the developed countries. So you cut that down. I estimate 100 million people have been severely injured. I estimate 20 million people are refugees that have had to leave their homes and their cities and are living under very difficult circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. We held a symposium, 5G health symposium, a couple of months ago in Australia, and one of my statements was that, I was completely oblivious. I've done a lot of research and been involved with a lot of things in my life, and I was sort of completely. People had spoken about at different conferences, etc., about it, and it wasn't really on my radar at all. My opening remarks were to the effect that, if anything, we probably should apologise to people like yourself that have been saying these things and screaming and shouting it from the rooftops for a long time. And I don't know for what reason, but we haven't been listening prior to this point in time. So why do you think, the issue for 5G has really sort of opened up? The 5G crisis symposium happens this week globally around the world. Why do you think it's happening at this? I mean, what's your experience, Arthur? Are people more aware than ever at this point in time? Are they taking action, particularly in the States? Are people aware of it? Are people waking up? Are people?
I think more people are waking up. More people are talking about it. More people have heard about it, and the difference is that more people are aware that they themselves have been injured, or they know people that have been injured. The other difference is that 5G is a radical change. In other words, the increments from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G have been fairly gradual.
Yeah.
And the technology has not changed that much. What is being developed now in 5G, and what is already being rolled out in most parts of the world, unfortunately, at the beginning stages, it's a whole different technology. The frequencies being used are much higher. We've been using the lower parts of the microwave spectrum, basically 900 megahertz and 1,500 megahertz, 2,400. It depends on what country you live in as to what exact frequencies have been used. Now that's no longer adequate because we need they're rolling out what they call the Internet of Things.
Yes.
Which means machines and objects are going to communicate with one another. It's no longer going to be just people communicating with one another. It's going to be objects communicating with one another. Your milk carton will communicate with your refrigerator and automatically order milk for you when they're out. There's going to be antennas in every single thing you own. This is the plan. And so there's going to be like 1 trillion antennas in the world, which is unprecedented. And in order to have the kind of bandwidth to make the Internet of Things work, and to make, for example, they want to sell everybody driverless cars.
Yes.
We now have a few driverless cars on the road. The existing wireless infrastructure is adequate for that, but if everybody has a driverless car, it's not going to be adequate. So you're going to need an enormous amount of bandwidth, which means you have to have much higher frequencies. So they're going to millimeter waves, 20 gigahertz, 50 gigahertz, 80 gigahertz. There's plans for 100 gigahertz. And these are very tiny waves that are easily blocked by solid objects. But also, so there's two reasons that the antennas have to be very close to where you live. That number one, the waves are blocked by trees and by cars and by buildings. And also the huge amount of bandwidth that is being used up, each antenna will only be able to serve efficiently maybe 20 or 30 people. So they're going to have antennas outside of every third to fifth house throughout in every city, all over the world. And the exposure levels are going to be enormously greater. And here in this country, the Federal Communications Commission has relaxed its exposure standards so that because they think that this is still going to be safe because millimeter waves don't penetrate your body very far. Yeah. So they've relaxed the exposure standards, and you're now allowed to be exposed to 10, 100 times more radiation than you used to be. And also the antennas are going to be closer, so that increases your exposure. And your mobile phone will be 10 times more powerful than it used to be. This is what's creating the awareness, and as it's being rolled out, more people are getting injured, and there's being reports of birds falling out of the sky and insects vanishing all over the world. It's just magnified. The unfortunate truth is that still the majority of people don't want to know about it, and part of the reason is that everybody is now dependent on their cell phone. The other thing that people are not paying attention to, even though, yes, we have a 5G summit coming up, and yes, more and more people are aware of the controversy, very few people are talking about what's going on in space.
Right.
And this is what I am even more concerned about than the 5G on Earth. Okay. And that's why I am a co-author and the administrator of a worldwide appeal. It's called the International Appeal to Stop 5G on Earth and in Space. And this is circulating around the world, and we now have signatures from 202 nations, and so far 130,000 signatures, and we're about to push it very hard before we present it to all the governments of the world.
Yeah.
What's going on in space is there are 5 or 6 companies now that have gotten into a race to give us 5G from satellites, global 5G that will provide 5G service to every square meter of the Earth. And if they all launch the systems that they are being planned, there will be 20,000 satellites in space broadcasting 5G globally. Presently, there are only about 2,000 satellites in total for all purposes combined in space. A company, an American company called SpaceX, alone wants to launch 12,000 satellites, and they have permission from the Federal Communications Commission to do so. Amazon just got into the race. They want to launch in excess of 3,000 satellites. A company called OneWeb wants to launch in excess of 3,000 satellites. There are a number of companies. SpaceX has already begun to launch its satellites. OneWeb has already begun to launch its satellites. The problem with this is that this is going to alter. These satellites are going to be located in low Earth orbit in the Earth's ionosphere.
Right.
Now, this is going to pollute the electromagnetic environment of the Earth. I have a chapter in my book that describes the electric universe. And what is very important for living things is what's called the global electrical circuit, which atmospheric physicists study, and which circulates through the bodies of everything that lives on the surface of the Earth. If you pollute that from above, you change the electromagnetic environment of the entire Earth, this is going to have catastrophic consequences to every living thing. And people have no clue. Because once this is turned on, so I'm worried about what's going to happen, not gradually by the gradual rollout of 5G, but suddenly when SpaceX turns on its first 420 satellites in about 6 months from now. And I've been also studying that phenomenon for about 20 years, actually over 20 years, ever since Iridium. We now have, presently, if you have a satellite phone, most of them work from two existing companies called Iridium and Globalstar. When those companies began commercial service, I did worldwide interviews with so-called electrically sensitive people, and 86% of them reported to me that on that morning that Iridium began its global satellite phone service, they became severely ill, and many of them didn't think they would live, and that included myself. When Iridium went bankrupt, and it was resurrected, on the day that it was resurrected, again, there were dramatic symptoms and illnesses all over the world. There were reports when Iridium went online, homing pigeons got lost in pigeon races for weeks, and the sport changed permanently and never recovered. When Iridium was resurrected from bankruptcy, all of a sudden, and I'm just talking about things that made the news.
Yes.
There were spontaneous abortions and foal deaths in very expensive racehorses, far and wide. It affected not only homing pigeons, but birds were not flying in the sky. I've been monitoring this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and that was from 66 satellites. We're talking about the prospect of 20,000. And this is what I'm trying to wake people up to, and people are just it's not catching on. People, it's not catching on like 5G antennas on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's much more dangerous.
And then you also have the technology as well with the drones. So they're talking about putting the HAPS, the HAPS systems and the Zephyr systems to run up to fly continually within like a 200 kilometer radius for 6 months at a time, that are completely solar powered. And
you're talking about the drones and the balloons and the high flying aircraft. I'm not as concerned about those as I am about the satellites.
Right.
Because those are not up there in the ionosphere. They're at a lower altitude, and they're much farther away from the ground than these antennas that could be outside your bedroom window. The problem with the satellites is not the direct radiation, but the alteration of the Earth's electromagnetic field.
So I'm going to go into some questions here I've got from community as well, but what's the potential impact of tampering with the Earth's magnetic field, Arthur?
Worst case scenario, the end of life on the planet.
Yeah.
I view it as the most immediate threat to life on Earth.
Okay. And what's the probability on the timeline based on what they're planning on rolling out?
I don't deal in probabilities. I'm warning people. There's no way of knowing the probability.
Okay, got it. So I'm going to ask, there's some questions here. One of the members of the community, Catherine Gioffi, I think that's if I pronounced her name correctly. But she's asked, I'd love to know what Arthur considers the best way to proceed. A year on from his film and launch of the appeal, what progress does he notice?
I am about to send out an email, actually, today, a mass email to everybody that has signed the appeal and everybody that I'm in touch with on this issue throughout the world, urging everybody to send out the appeal to at least 10 other people to sign it. We want to get as many signatures in the next month as possible. And then I am assembling volunteers from all over the world to hand deliver the appeal to their governments. That was the original intention. It's been a year now. It's time to deliver it to governments and to governmental organizations like the United Nations, the World Health Organization. There has to be a concerted effort to put a halt to this, and this. So this is in process. I need volunteers. I need donations of money. We need this is going to be costly. We need to take out radio and print and TV ads all over the world to publicize the appeal as it's being delivered to governments. I am prosecuting a lawsuit to stop 5G here in the United States. I need to pay my lawyers. So this is what I'm putting out, is that we need many more signatures, we need volunteers, we need money, we need donations.
Yeah, got it. So, and then the next part of it is, does Arthur believe that the legal approach is the best one?
It's a necessary element. The legal lawsuits by themselves cannot win unless the public supports it.
Yeah.
Public education by itself is not enough. There has to be concrete plans. In other words, there has to be lawsuits. There has to be legislation has to be changed, and the public has to be educated. This is not some grand plot to to kill us. I hear this quite frequently. Oh, the deep state is trying to depopulate the world. No, this is economic. This is consumer driven.
Yeah.
The attachment of almost every human being now to their mobile phone is what's driving this. Everybody's using their mobile phone more and more. Everybody is putting more and more apps on their mobile phone, and they're selling us, and people are buying them. They're selling us Fitbits to monitor your bodily
functions
while you're exercising. They're selling us smart refrigerators, smart hairbrushes, smart baby diapers. It's like everything's supposed to be smart and operate and intelligent and have artificial intelligence and self-driving cars and more and more and more and more and more. And people are buying it and people like it, and consumers have to stop buying the stuff.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. That is what is going to stop 5G. If people do not get rid of their mobile phones and their wireless devices, we are not going to stop 5G, and we're not going to survive. That's the bottom line.
Okay, and then the next part of that question as well, Arthur, is that can the legal system really have an effect, or is it consuming our energy and money? And isn't it a system that springs out of the rows of the lower and older consciousness?
The lower and what?
So isn't it like, as far as the legal system is concerned, isn't it a system that springs out of the rows of lower and old consciousness?
Lower and old consciousness. No, it's technology that has changed. Human beings do not change. We are the same as what we've always been, but we have technology now that can destroy us.
Yeah.
The legal action, like I said, is only a part of the campaign. If you go before a judge, he's dependent on his cell phone too, and he doesn't want to believe it. There has to be public awareness before the courts will pay any attention.
Yeah. Okay, and the next part of the question as well is that this is more on an esoteric level, but like, what's Arthur's take on expanding consciousness and rising our frequencies through unconditional love, etc., and is there any effect noticed on that front?
I don't agree with the assumptions behind that question.
Okay, got it.
This is a problem purely of technology. I grew up I went to college in the late 60s, the 1960s, and we were talking about this sort of thing back then. Oh, unconditional love will save the world. It's all a matter of consciousness, and no, it's what we do that matters, not what we think.
Yeah.
You can change your thoughts all you want, but if you drive an automobile, you're going to kill wildlife. And simply changing your consciousness will not stop that. The car is doing the damage. The cell phone is doing the damage. The cell phone is putting out the radiation. Your thoughts will not stop that.
Yeah. And I guess that there's some of that quasi thought as well around people sort of meditating and shifting consciousness. But from what I'm hearing, what you're saying, the only thing that's going to stop it is to be able to take direct action and not to engage in that technology.
Well, direct action is get rid of your cell phone.
Yeah.
Turn it off. Getting rid of a cell phone nowadays, people are dependent on it for their job, for their social life. It's going to be a process, but we have to start using it less, not more. And what is happening now is we're using it more, and that is what is causing 4G not to be sufficient. I studied alternative forms of healing after I had to leave medical school.
Yes.
My teacher I'm a certified practitioner of the Rubenfeld synergy method. And my teacher was Alana Rubenfeld, and she taught us body, mind, emotions, spirit. We have to pay attention to all of them. One thing that really stuck with me from one of the classes is when she said, when your house is on fire, you don't call the fire department that's meditating.
Yeah.
You call the fire department that's going to come and put out the fire.
Yeah.
And that's the situation that we're in now.
And yeah, I've got that. And then the last part of this question as well is that is this tremendous threat from 5G maybe a catalyst for people to wake up or to take sides? And idealistically, as I was sharing in the symposium that we had as well, Arthur, is that, it's not necessarily just a conversation for 5G. It's also a conversation about what we're out to create for the world. We know it.
But we're destroying the world.
Yeah.
We're destroying the world on many fronts. We're not creating anything. We're destroying. We're destroying our forests. We're destroying our oceans. We're destroying our atmosphere. And we're irradiating ourselves to death. And that's the emergency that I'm trying to mobilize people to put out that fire.
Yeah.
Once we're done with that fire, we will have some more tools that we've used, hopefully, to win this fight in order to make some progress on other grounds. Global warming. That's also an emergency, but it's secondary to electromagnetic radiation, which is even more immediate of an emergency than climate change. Plastics in our ocean. We have to stop using plastic like it's water.
Yeah.
We have to stop treating our forests as a commodity. We have to start respecting ecosystems. Overpopulation. Everything's out of control.
Yeah.
What I'm addressing in the international appeal, in my books, in my talks, is the tip of the iceberg. It's the emergency. We've got to put out this fire so we can deal with everything else.
Yeah. And how do people find you? What's your domain name and your web address for your appeal, Arthur?
The appeal is 5G spaceappeal.org.
Right.
The word space, in other words, 5G SPACE appeal.org. Okay. That's the website of the International Appeal to Stop 5G on Earth and in Space. We need as many signatures as possible. As I said, I'm going to be beginning a series of emails mobilizing people around the world. That's going to start today.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Arthur. Sorry, you go.
That's the way to contact me, and there's a way to contact me on that website as well.
Okay, great. I'll post the link in there as well in this interview here. So I just wanted to just check in you as we're sort of getting towards closing out with closing remarks. Like, what else can people do to contribute towards this, interrupting or disrupting this current trajectory that we're on, apart from what we've mentioned already, in relation to minimising and reducing EMS exposure and usage and consumerism, etc.?
The single most important thing that people can do is get rid of their cell phone.
Yeah.
Their mobile phone. Because that's what is driving this.
Okay, got it. Well, and anything else?
If you have a mobile phone and you want to be able to use it in an emergency anywhere on the planet, we've got to irradiate the whole planet. That's the bottom line.
Okay. Okay, and anything else that you'd like to share with anyone else that's listening in to this interview before we close out, Arthur?
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for making your time available, and thank you for your contribution of what you're doing about getting the word out, and everything that you're doing about being outspoken. Your contribution, it's very much appreciated. Our intention is to reach as many people as possible and have people wake up to the consequences and what's occurring on the current trajectory at the moment. So thank you for your contribution and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Thank you, Arthur. Thanks for joining us.